people cannot wait to get to. Cannot wait to get to this, this idea, this cultural integration. How do you go about this? What do you do in looking at what has been shared in authenticity, now what has been put on the table for the vision, and which is probably going to be at the 36,000 foot level. Now, integration, the mind of culture, is this where we really get in there and roll up our sleeves?
Yeah, we really do. We really get in there and roll up our sleeves. And this is where we get into a lot of the nuts and bolts, right? What's our plan? What are the objectives? Who's going to do what? And I find most organizations fall into one of two camps. As you said, they can't wait to get here to integration so they can take action, they can do something. And then there's some organizations that actually love the authenticity and design phases more because they're fascinated by the ideas and what they're creating, and then they'll kind of skimp on the integration phase of it, and that usually creates, in either case, whether you try to integrate too fast or you don't integrate well or pay enough attention to it, in either case you really are going to create extreme frustration, most likely among your employees, because this isn't going to come together well.
Yeah. I mean, isn't this the famous story about taking employee satisfaction surveys and what happens with people when they bring in another employee satisfaction survey? Isn't this the story that goes back decades and decades and decades, which really talks to, oh my gosh, one more time, they're going to ask us how we feel about something and do nothing about it. Right. Mm-hmm. But, don't you have to do something? I know that you are a big fan of Peter Drucker, and he has something interesting to say about this.
He does. And Edgar Schein does too, as well. Yeah. So Peter Drucker, his quote that I love is, if you want something new, you have to stop doing something old, which may sound so it's common sense. But when we really think about it, a lot of organizations, a lot of us as people, don't necessarily do this. We don't think about what we need to stop doing when we start doing something new. Something else Edgar Schein, I heard him say recently on a webinar, who is one of the forefathers of organizational culture, talked about this idea, going back to your comment about employee satisfaction surveys. He said sometimes organizations don't take into account if they do an employee satisfaction or an employee engagement survey, they've got to actually do something about the results they receive. Because if they don't, they break trust. So if you're going to put out a survey, you actually you've just taken on a mantle of responsibility to respond to what people say, to take some action in a timely manner, to not just say, these are the results and we'll think about now what we're going to do for the next 6 months. That's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then we're back into the same old conversation about, my gosh, how did we don't you hear this? I don't know how we got back here. I don't know how we got back here with employees being alienated. I don't know how we got back here, but from where you sit, you've seen so much of this. And at each step of the way, the potentiality for this to go sideways. That's why your model is not just 3 bullet points on a piece of paper. These are literally, when you go to Claudette's website, what you're going to see is 3 circles that are interrelated. There's a relationship between each of these. So I don't imagine, Claudette, you're going to go into an organization that says, you know what, I think I want to do that design thing, but I'm not really sure that I want to do the other 2. What do you say to folks like that?
Great question. Yeah. So yes, the Cultural Brilliance model is a Venn diagram for a reason. And I explained that really you cannot, it'd be like eating only one food group all the time, right? I'm only eating protein, but nothing else. Okay. You'd probably be fine for a long time, but eventually your body would not be as healthy as it could be. And this is the same idea, that you can't just go in and design, because what are you going to design? If you haven't figured out what's authentic, and you're not going to have a plan for integration. You've really got, it's a holistic model, and you have to address all 3. Otherwise it's like a sports team who's about to win a championship, and they rest on their laurels. And we've seen so many decades of those kinds of stories, right, where then the team that's losing in the last couple of minutes of the game says, wow, we have an opportunity. They're not paying a lot of attention anymore, and they score some touchdowns and win.
Oh, now
It's
you're
the same
talking about
yeah.
the Seahawks. There we
Right.
go. I want to tell you, for those of us that live out here with the Seahawks, we don't really appreciate those nail biters, right? We don't really appreciate that. But you're right about that. We change our approach and our whole attitude about what we want to happen. I love that you shared that, because we do that in organizations, and we think it is the safest way to play this out. But yet it's not. We think that, wow, by not taking the time and effort, by not learning what this is about, by not using a process that doesn't leave anybody out, we get to talk about the things that have been in the room anyway. So don't we think it's fascinating that because we're not talking about them, we think they go away, the issues?
It is, and it's that famous definition of dysfunction we all know, right? Doing the
Yeah.
same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
We do see it over and over again in organizations where this idea is, if we don't talk about it, it might go away. I don't want to address it. That might be safer. When one of the smartest things you could possibly do is actually acknowledge what's happening within your culture, to the positive and the negative. Acknowledge
Right.
both.
Right. I mean, I think that is so important. And to make sure, and this is really a tough one, to make sure that when you do share your opinion, there is no punishment for it. I think that in the past 10 years, we've seen a lot of punishment for people that are speaking up about what they believe. And I know that in the work you do, and talking about this, that is a no-no, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's a no-no, right? Part of having a brilliant culture is that people feel safe to speak up and say what's on their mind, share their opinions. There's a environment of safety where you can debate really important issues, and that's what I like to call the cultural landscape, which is, what is the health and well-being of our culture and our organization? What does that look like? And cultural landscape also includes, what's the history of our culture? What are the traditions? What are the rituals? All of those things. But you have to have a landscape where it's safe to speak up in order to have a successful, brilliant culture.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, I got to tell you, this hour has gone by. We're going to continue to really have Claudette share some of the amazing things that this particular description, cultural brilliance, really touches. And without this in organizations, forget about talking about return on investment, forget about talking about forget about it. This is really now what is never talked about, which is below the tip of the iceberg. And yet people are so wanting to be part of their organizations again. Can you tell folks again the best way to find out more about you, but most importantly, for anybody listening to this show, doesn't matter where you live, how can they contact you directly?
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, so my website is claudetterowley.com. Email address is right there on the website. And the other thing I want to share with folks is that I have a very short couple of paragraph weekly newsletter that goes out called Leadership Mindset, and it comes out on Monday morning. It's a great way to start thinking about leadership for the week. No matter where you are in an organization, we're all leading. We're all leading.
Yeah, I love this. Claudette, thank you. One last question. Personal message. What is it? What would you like to leave us with?
When I think about cultural brilliance, I love one of the quotes by Gandhi, "Be the change you want to see." And I think if we become the change we want to see in organizations, our organizations can shift and change and become brilliant much, much more quickly. So that's what I'd love to leave people with.
Oh, I love it. And I love that because now we can show up authentically and do that. Our vision will give new insight for what we can create. And when we're thinking about putting that vision on paper, we get to see it all come together. Thank you for all the great work that you do, Claudette. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Pat.
All right. For those of you out there, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
You've been listening to the hit show Cultural Brilliance Radio, the DNA of organizational excellence with Claudette Rowley. Conversations that are transforming the world of culture and business. You can download this podcast and find out more about Claudette and her breakthrough work at ClaudetteRowley.com. please contact Claudette and find out how you can create a brilliant culture.
The preceding audio was via a Skype call.